Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's always a pleasure to be on this show.
Definitely, same here. Now, while we sort of have an interesting story from Afreximbank, I think we should begin from the home front. What was the big story for you? That the Warri Refinery and Petrochemical Company has been shut down since January 25, 2025. I mean, that was just a few days shy of 1 month since the reported resumption. Or the fact that the story made it to the public domain. Which of this is the big story for you?
Look, that the refinery was shut down, honestly, it wouldn't really be a big news item if there was transparency from the beginning. If you recall what I've always said about those refineries, the refineries have been abandoned without turnaround maintenance for a long time. Naturally, when you go, it's literally like you have a car that you've parked for 5 years and you decide you want to fix that car and get it running. It's going to take some time before you ever get to optimal production for that car. And that's the same thing with the refinery. When you've left a refinery on service for quite some time, and then you then go back into that refinery, you're going to discover things that were working properly before that are no longer working. So from a technical point of view, we always expected that the stop-start cycle was going to be one that we had to contend with as it related to the two refineries. That's even both Warri and Port Harcourt. It's not news that that refinery has had to go through some form of shutdown. I think the bigger news would have been if the refinery worked without any breaks after so many years of poor maintenance and lack of a turnaround maintenance. I think that would have been the bigger news. So for anyone who understands how a refinery works, this shouldn't be big news. It was something that was going to happen. Now the question is the real question we should be asking is there a plan to fix this and to improve the ongoing efficiencies of the refineries? I think that if we are able to get some comfort around that, then eventually some of these refineries will be operating at near capacity. Also remember that when it comes to capacity utilization for a refinery, it's almost impossible for you to get the nameplate capacity when you have abandoned turnaround maintenance for a number of years. So we also don't expect that the Warri Refinery, when it comes back on stream, will be able to operate at 100% capacity.
Well, you sort of sound quite optimistic. I mean, for a lot of persons, I've seen and heard, backlash and all of that, talking about NNPCL's capacity to do right, and also looking at whether it's efficient and all of that. But it's interesting to hear your perspective today. Why is that?
So look, because in the first place, Perpetual, let's go back. A few years ago, the push we had from the private sector was for the NNPC to sell those refineries to private sector operators. The government has proven itself to be incapable of efficiently running anything. And I say that with my full chest, right? And the problem that creates is that when you have situations like this, where the government has gone ahead without private sector involvement or ownership to risk capital, this sort of stop-starts are going to be standard occurrences in those kind of facilities. Look, even the Dangote refinery, that's a brand new refinery, had its teething issues when it started. They had to do significant levels of calibration before we got to the point where the refinery is operating at the current capacity that it is. Now, if you then bring that into a refinery that is several decades old, has not been properly maintained, has not been effectively run, you would be a bit foolhardy to expect that such a refinery would immediately hit optimal production or optimal operations at the beginning of its operations. So it's going to take time. And I'm giving the NNPC the benefit of the doubt that they know that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution that they have, that it's going to take them time to be able to get those refineries working efficiently. And they must be disciplined enough to see the process through. It's not about doing photo ops, photo ops to come and celebrate things that, oh yeah, we're operating now. Let everyone come and celebrate with us. Yes, that is fine, but ensure that you have a long-term plan to keep the refinery working. And that is how refineries keep their operations ongoing.
Well, that's quite interesting. Now, beyond the fact that these refineries are not delivering intended results, you've given some reasons, fair enough. There is also the fact that monies have been spent. I mean, we're talking about $2 billion here, most of which was borrowed, some of which, of course, was borrowed. The NNPCL, on its part, is also indebted to some organizations. It has its forward contracts and some obligations. All of this sort of, snuff life out of the sector. How concerning is this, and what are the consequences of all of these?
So look, the NNPC as an organization has gone through a major transformative process. Don't forget that until a few years ago, before the passing of the PIA, it was a corporation that was running a very opaque structure and opaque system. As a limited liability company, the requirements are different. It has an effective board of directors that it reports to now, and the governance structure is different. Now, to then put a second layer of that, the NNPC has recently the board has completely been revamped. We now have, probably for the first time in a long time, a board that is technically competent, a board that has expertise and private sector exposure.
Until proven otherwise?
Say that again?
Until proven otherwise.
Well, so the point is that, in fairness, they've only been there for a month. In fact, it's a month on Friday. So, you're not going to expect miracles from them. However, if the sound bites that we're hearing from the board, and especially from the management, are anything to go by, I would say that there is significant hope that finally we have a very professional, board of directors, a very professional management team with expertise in the private sector that are able to run the Nigerian-owned National Petroleum Company. I think that we have to give them that time to be able to do some work, and then we can judge them based on the outcomes. So I would go back and say, I would love to see the 2025 financial statements of the NNPC. I would love to see the level of transparency that comes from the management on being honest and upfront with the state of its finances and the state of its operations and its general well-being. And then at the end of that, we can actually clearly then say, look, this is a company that we can take seriously. But right now, I think it's too early to judge the management team. They're literally trying to find their foot, after a month of being in the saddle.
All right, so before we move on to the Afrexim story, that's more like a two-in-one question now. Is there hope for these state-owned refineries to sort of deliver the desired net petrol and petroleum products exporter status that Nigeria clearly deserves and desires? And also, some persons are calling for asset sale and all of that. Do you think, that's the solution to some of these issues we're having in that sector?
So first question, which is that is there hope for the state-owned refineries? The truth is, again, I always say this, that a company's success is dependent on the quality of its management. The market and all of those things can be hoops that you need to jump through, but if you've got quality management, they would be able to make hard decisions and be able to make unbiased decisions. I believe that the quality of persons that the president has appointed to the board of the NNPC are extremely competent. They have worked with multinationals, IOCs, all over the world. I believe that if they're able to bring that competence to bear, they will be able to make the right decisions concerning these refineries. Now, your second question, which you mean was a double-barrel one, speaks to how do we look at the options for the NNPC. I still think that a privatization of the NNPC is the way to go, where the NNPC is, the government is able to sell a significant portion or a significant stake of the company to the Nigerian public. And that brings in a higher level of competence, a higher level of corporate governance and scrutiny. And obviously, the NNPC then needs to look at the assets on its books, such as the refineries, and ask itself hard questions. Is that the best capital allocation for its business? If it's not, then maybe the time to sell it is now, when they can still get value for it.
All right, now let's move on to the other story. Afreximbank's, $3 billion revolving credits. That's what we are looking at right now. It's no doubt a refreshingly welcome development, and the objectives, they are quite interesting. Looking at what has been said, but talk to us. What do you make of this? Really, how might this sort of impact field trade flows within Africa and also between Africa and the Caribbean?
So, look, trade has always been a problem for the continent. Part of the fallout of us realizing that trade is a problem was the AfCFTA, which was supposed to allow free trade among African countries. You'll be surprised that Africa has more inter-trade barriers or intra-trade barriers than we have with the rest of the world. Donald Trump today is tariffing the whole world, but believe it or not, African countries probably have higher tariffs than the US is placing on us. So in the first place, inter-African trade has the capacity to galvanize the economies of Africa faster than us trading with the rest of the world. Now, the second element of this is that there needs to be a smooth trade settlement process that encourages such trades. So first thing that the AFDB and the Afreximbank had been trying to do was to ensure that currency settlements between African currencies became easier. So you had the platforms that were created, and I think First Bank is one of the big banks that is driving that platform. Now bring that to what Afrexim is trying to do. Today, refining capacity on the continent is the highest it's ever been. Dangote Refinery, 650,000 barrels a day of refining capacity. Nigerian refineries, almost 450,000, depending on the nameplate refining capacity. South Africa has refining capacity. A number of countries, Angola is in the process of building a refinery, being led by the Chinese. The Ghanaians and the Ivorians are also looking to build some form of refineries. So understanding that as the refining capacity on the continent increases, then it means that Africans have a source from which they can buy their products. Now, the Afreximbank's move to provide a trade facility is perhaps the crown jewel on everything it's been trying to do prior to now. Remember that Afrexim funded the NNPC for the refinery upgrade, funded Dangote refineries. It's funding a number of refineries across the continent. So the right thing for it to do is also to make it easier for those refineries to be able to trade by providing the trade facilities for them. So this is a fantastic support structure for the continent as well as for the Caribbeans. Remember that Oando recently was selected as preferred bidder for one of the refineries in the Caribbean. Again, Afrexim is able to provide a trade facility that allows people trade cargoes, both crude oil and refined products from those refineries. I think this is positive for the continent, and I would encourage each of the countries across the continent to take advantage of it, because again, Nigeria benefits once we become net exporters of petroleum products.
Absolutely. Well, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll continue from where we stopped. Thank you. Glad to know you're still with us. And of course, we're going back to the conversation about Afreximbank launching $3 billion refinery support fund. And I have with me Femi Olade. Femi, thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you. I'm still here.
All right. So earlier you were talking about how important this is, especially for Nigeria, Angola, and some of the countries that are producing or refining. Now, talk to us in clearer terms. What I would like you to talk about how this actually works.
So basically, the way this trades work, so let's take it as an example. Prior to now, the West African market, which we describe as WAF in trading circles, was the biggest shot in the world. Basically, most of the refineries in Europe, in Asia, were literally producing products that ended up in West Africa. And for those products to actually get to West Africa, the buyers in West Africa had to open letters of credit or effectively sometimes actually pay in advance for those products to get here. So guess what? the US or the Europeans come to Nigeria, come to Angola, they pick up crude barrels, they take it to their refineries. They don't have crude in their countries, but they refine our crude and then bring on ships the same crude that they took away from us that has been refined, and they bring them back to Nigeria, bring them back to West Africa, and selling to the West African continent and the African continent. Now, the African continent hasn't done any value add to that. We've literally just taken our crude and exchanged it for petroleum products without benefiting from any trade. What this does is Afreximbank is now making available to countries and big producers the ability for them to be able to buy from the African market. So Angola or say Burkina Faso, who's a landlocked country, can go to Afreximbank and say, I want to buy $100 million worth of products from Dangote refineries, but I don't want to pay cash for it. I just want to open a letter of credit. Afrexim would then avail that line of credit to Angola or to Burkina Faso, or the country that wants to buy the products. Afrexim makes it available to them. They can then open a line of credit with Dangote refineries and lift the products. So they've become literally the financiers of that acquisition, and it allows each of the parties enough time for them to be able to find the financing and pay off whatever trading facilities that Afrexim have made available to them. One thing Afrexim is also doing for themselves is that they've recently just created a trading business as well that is able to trade products and crude. They are also guaranteeing their own market by providing a trade line that allows people to buy products from these refineries, refineries that were originally funded by Afrexim, and they can also fund the offtake of those products, and their trading company also benefits from the trading margins that are available from those products. So it's a win-win for everyone that is involved in the loop, the ultimate buyers of the products, the sellers and the refinery owners, as well as Afrexim, who's able to make some money from providing these trade facilities. But it increases the velocity of trade in the market, because then government or companies don't have to go and raise money before they can buy products. They can use this trade facility line to actually fund the acquisition of their products.
Right, and hopefully, Africa will be able to get to that point where it is self-sufficient in the production of this petroleum products, and of course, just like you said, increase trade and all that. Thank you so much, Femi Olade, senior partner at Intel Capital, for your time on the show today.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.